much higher if there's no additional action taken by DHS. Then for some of you here today, I know you might be wondering then what shall we do, right? So this is what we're going to be talking about. Some of you might want to ask, what if I just forget about H1B and go straight to the green card application? Yes, you can do that. That is actually a very good strategy. But first of all, you might want to understand how that works. So the green card is its own process. You don't have to be in any other status in order to start the green card process. All right. At the same time, you won't be able to get green card just because you are having certain visa type. So if you're in, even you get H1B status, right? You're an H1B visa holder, then you won't automatically get a green card just because you are in certain status. So these two are independent from each other. Okay, so some of you might be asking then, okay, then I'm just gonna go straight to the green card process, right? Why do I need H1B at all? Okay, the reason is the green card process consists of two phases, two steps. First, you need to file a petition. Okay, that is the basis for someone to file for the actual green card, which is the form I-485 to adjust your status. The second is the actual filing of the I-485. That's the application for permanent residency. Right? If you only file the first part, the petition, it won't give you any authorization to stay in the US. That's the challenge. You have to file the I-485 so that you are authorized to stay in the US. Otherwise, merely filing the petition itself, be that I-140, be that I-130, you won't be able to stay. So that's why a lot of the students here need to have the work visa in order to stay after graduation. So if they want to work, wait for the green card outside the US, you can do that. You don't need to have any work visa if you want to wait outside the US, right? But if you want to stay within the US while you are waiting for the green card to come, you need to plan what status you have until you can file the I-485. So that's how it works. All right. So some of the work visas listed here are some of the most common work visas, but there are also other type of work visas, like say for specific countries, like say here, treaty countries. I'm not going to be covering those much because I assume most of you might be coming from those non-treaty countries. That's why we might be talking about some other visa types today. Okay, that's how that works. Okay, so between I-485 and the filing of the petition, there is a very important concept that's called priority date or visa bulletin. Okay, because some of you might be asking, okay, if I can only stay after I file I-485, then I'm gonna just file I-485 right now, today or tomorrow, right? So that I can be authorized to stay. Well, you cannot file I-485 unless your so-called priority date is current. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with this concept of priority date. I know some of you might have already known this, but I assume a lot of you, if you're not familiar with the green card process yet, it may be an idea, like a concept that's foreign to you. So I'm going to spend a little time here explaining how this works. Okay. So if we go to the Department of State, website, okay, you will see a chart. That is the visa bulletin. That would be your friend during the green card application process. Okay, you are gonna see this friend every month. Okay, because Department of State release the visa bulletin every month. So for anyone who's in the green card process, he or she probably will check that every month. So you're gonna come to this page on the Department of State a lot whenever you start the green card process. Okay, so for those of you who were born, so it's the country of birth, okay, regardless of your current citizenship, it's the country of birth that determines which line you go to. So if you were born into like mainland China or India, you might notice that the wait time for some of the employment-based categories is longer than some other countries. So for the rest of the world, the line is shorter. But actually, the demand is pretty high. So we actually notice the rest of the world are also having some visa backlog right now in the EB2 and EB3 categories. Okay, so basically, this is the visa bulletin for October 2024. Okay, you will see a date here. The date is for people who were born in that country for that category. So the first, second, third represents EB1, EB2, and EB3. Okay, let's say if we look at EB2 India, that date is January the 1st, 2013. That means for those who have a priority date before January the 1st, 2013, you can file I-485 right now in October. Okay, so that just give you like some idea like how long the wait is. And then for like people born in mainland China, if you're in EB3, the date is November 15, 2020. That means if your priority date was before this date, November 15, 2020, you can file for the I-45 right now, this month in October. Does that mean the wait time is about 4 years for mainland China born and like 11 years or even longer for like India born? I'll say like you can kind of estimate like roughly like that, but not always, because each month DOS is gonna release the visa bulletin. It's not gonna go move forward month by month. Sometimes it's gonna advance a lot. Sometimes it may just stop there, and sometimes it even retrogresses. So each month it's different. That's why you need to check every month. But it will give you like an idea like how long the wait might be. All right. So here we keep talking about like this priority date. What is that? How can I get my priority date? So priority date is your kind of like your number. If you're in a line, if you go to, let's say, DMV, right, or a hospital, the first thing you do is you get a ticket and you have a number in it. So priority date is your number in that ticket. Okay, so it's very important you get that ticket as early as possible if you're in a line. Okay, so that priority date would be usually the date your petition is filed. That is the date. There's one exception, like if you're in a EB2, EB3 category, like the employer file the EB2, EB3 for you through the labor certification, then that would be an earlier date. That's the date the labor certification is filed. But in all other categories, it's the date that petition is filed. So that can be a family petition. I mean, if it's in the family category, that's going to be a family petition I-130, employer based cases, or some self-sponsored self-petition like EB1, EB2 NIW, that's going to be I-140. In EB5, that's going to be I-526. So that's the date the petition is filed. That is why even though the petition won't allow you to stay in the US, you still want to file that as soon as possible, because that would get you a ticket earlier, and then you will get to the line earlier, getting to the line earlier. So filing the petition will get you into the line earlier, but only if that's approved, all right? If you just file, like do a frivolous filing, and that's eventually denied, then you have to leave the line. You can't stay in the line if it's denied. Right. So that's basically how the green card process works. Remember to file the petition as soon as possible. And some of you might be asking, can I talk to the employer to file a green card for me, like start the process for me, even though I don't have the H1B? Yes, there's nothing in the regulation that stops the employer from doing that. Only if the employer has their own policy, like we only sponsor like some employee if they have worked with us for how long, right? So that's internal policy. From the USCIS perspective, like from the regulation, there's no such requirement. You don't have to work for a certain amount of time. You don't even have to start working for them, for the employer to petition you. So the earlier you may start that conversation with the employer, that may be better. Okay. Okay. So this is some of the common ways to get a green card. They can be divided into, I would say, certain groups. Okay, you have a family member who can petition you, all right, or you have an employer who's willing to petition you. You are well achieved, so you petition for yourself, or you'd like to invest, like be an investor, invest certain amount, currently like 800,000, to create jobs and through the EB5 category, and then you can also get a green card. So those are the most common ways to get a green card: by a family member, by a job offer, through achievements, or through investment. Okay, they come with their own requirements. The most common way would still be for most international students would be the employer sponsorship, like through the labor certification. That's the most common way. However, we do see more and more students are able to do self-petition. If you can prove like your extraordinary circumstance, like your extraordinary ability, or you can prove you can bring like national benefit, like national interest to the US. That's also a possibility, especially for a lot of like the researchers, like who has PhDs, right? But the other employer-sponsored green card is more common. Okay. All right. Beside H1B, there's also some other visa types that are commonly used for someone to stay and work in the US. One other alternative would be O1, O1A, and O1B. O1B are for those who are in art, who does art, or who work in the motion picture industry. O1A is for everybody else, like say business, science, education, all kinds of other fields. The difference is there's no annual quota. You can file for O1 anytime throughout the year. That's a big benefit, right? But you have to show you meet certain criteria, like 3 out of the 8 in O1A and 3 out of the 6 for O1B. You have to show the extraordinary ability. So for the Biden administration, they have released quite some policy updates since like President Biden took office. The goal was to relax this criteria a little bit, especially for STEM major students, so that they can be more easily qualified for the O1A. However, they cannot really change the law. So the law remains the same. It's just like how we interpret the criteria is a little bit more relaxed. Okay, so that is for O1A and O1B. One other common way is the L1. So that's usually for those multinational companies, right? Like they have an overseas office. So they send the employee to that overseas office for 1 year, either in a managerial position or in a specialized knowledge position. And after 1 year, they kind of transfer this person back, and that person would be in L1 status. But this person would have to leave the US for 1 year. So that is a requirement. It's mandatory. You cannot go around that requirement. So you have to leave the US. Some of you might be asking, what if I stay in the US to work for the company? No, you cannot work for the overseas company within the US to meet that requirement. So that is, it really depends on whether personally you prefer doing that or not. Okay.
Marta, before you go to CPT, I do want to ask you a questions. Before today's session, we were kind of discussing about immigration policy changes regarding O1s. And also, you also mentioned something very interesting is that maybe the policy are changing for EB1 as well. So since today we're talking about green cards, do you want to share also some other insights when it comes to like changes to EB1?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for asking, Ryan. Yeah, actually this week, just a couple of days ago, the USCIS released a new policy update regarding EB1A. I don't want to get into too much technicality here today, but the overall idea is they are also relaxing some of the criteria for EB1A, or maybe just clarify a little bit more that certain criteria are more relaxed than a lot of the applicants think they are. So we have seen a lot of policy updates from the Biden administration between 2022 and 2023 to make the rule more relaxed. So that is a trend, which is a positive thing. That is supposed to attract more talents to stay within the US. That is the goal. However, um, practically speaking, uh, unfortunately, we don't see a lot of the first line officers really implement those updates that well. We do still get to see some RFEs like quoting some outdated like policy language, very unfortunately. So there does seem to be a little bit discrepancy of what we see in the news, like, hey, there's an update in the policy, yet when it comes to the actual cases, some officers do not seem to get it. Um, if that happens, so that's not just for you, it does happen to some other petitioners as well. What we would do is to just respond by reminding the officer, hey, the policy manual has been updated. The current policy manual says this, this should be the guideline for current adjudication on those cases. If still that doesn't work, then unfortunately, maybe some of the cases would have to be taken to the federal court to be litigated. I hope, your cases do not have to go that far and can get a more smooth adjudication, like a smooth approval at the initial stage. But yeah, just from a policy perspective, there have been some very good updates in the past couple years from the Biden administration. Okay. And then for those of you who may not find yourself qualified or be interested in some of the work visa types we just mentioned, you might want to continue studying, pursuing some programs. And at the same time, I know some of you might apply for the practical training to continue some of the work at certain companies. Then a very common question is there any risk? Well, first of all, the CPT, the practical training itself is in the regulation. It is a legal authorization to work. It should be legitimate. However, depending on how you use it or how the school like manages it, it is easy for like some abuse, right? So if you have those kind of practical training, then very likely or sometimes when you change status, like say you change into H1B status or you change to like a spouse status, or later on you adjust status like directly from F1 to the I-45, right? That's when USCIS would review your overall, like the full status history to determine whether you have always maintained your status. So you won't be able to know, like if USCIS, accept your status history until you file something with USCIS. But you can always look at the requirements of the CPT for students to make sure you stay compliant. So whenever there's some request for additional evidence from USCIS, when you are attempting to change status or just that status, you can provide them the documentation to show your compliance. First, you still need to pursue like as a full-time student. You have to show the full course of study. And some of you might think, oh yeah, that's easy, right? Like I am studying. I spend a lot of time online taking some online courses. Please pay attention. Physical attendance is required. You cannot completely be online. If a school allows you to be completely online, that is problematic. Okay. And also, whatever you do, during the internship, during the work, should be an integral part of the established curriculum. So basically, that should be related to what you study. So you cannot be studying one thing but doing a work in like completely irrelevant, right? That is also problematic because CPT is meant to provide the training opportunity for students while they are pursuing like school programs. All right. And then, yeah, the next is the same, like it has to be directly related to the student's major of study. And then usually between the school and the employer, there should be some cooperative agreement, like about how the training should be implemented at the employer. So those are some of the common RFEs regarding CPT we have seen when we work on some of the change of status and adjustment of status cases. Okay. This is about like some of the legal authority of CPT. So it is in the regulation. So it can be, used like legitimately. It's just like some bad players in the market may abuse it. So it may have a bad name, but it as long as it's managed properly, it is a legit work authorization. But certain programs are ineligible. For example, the English language training programs are ineligible for practical training. Okay? And here also, some of you might be asking like how long one can receive CPT. The only thing you need to keep in mind is if you receive 1 year or more of full-time curricula practical training, then that student would be ineligible for the OPT, like the post-completion OPT. So that's the limit. Like if you're pursuing like say a master, you still want to apply for OPT, make sure you don't use CPT more than 1 year. Otherwise, you're going to lose your OPT. Okay. And then about online class. Okay, I know some of the schools may have some hybrid schedule. So how does that work? So currently, USCIS defines, like the DHS defines like the online class as like online or through distance education and does not require a student's physical attendance for classes at all. So that is considered online class. So for some of those school programs that has like a hybrid model for some of those courses, that wouldn't be considered online class. All right. But however, you still need to stay compliant of all the other requirements to stay as a full-time student. All right, so that's pretty much all I want to share. Hope that helped clarify some of the concepts about student status, CPT, and how the green card process works. And we can take some of the questions now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. Now I'm going to share my screen. We do collected a lot of questions from our audiences today. So we're gonna go straight for number one. If you do have a questions uh, after today's presentation, yeah, you can still send in your questions for now in the Q&A sessions, and hopefully we can answer them for you. So the first questions, can you talk a little bit about, I think this is more of a general questions. What if somebody has been in the US for more than 10 years? What kind of visas are they on? And how do they qualify for that type of visa? So I think to summarize it is to what type of visa actually give people a long term to stay in the US, and if our audiences are able to get those kind of visas.
I would say each type of visa is designed for a very specific purpose. And then it also has its own validity period. So because all the visas are non-immigrant visas, so they are meant to be temporary. So unless that's the green card or immigrant visa, which allows you to stay here permanently. Otherwise, all the other visas, for some, they can be renewed indefinitely, but still they are temporary in nature. So they don't allow anyone to stay here like permanently. So they have to be renewed. I would have to say like, so most of the time it's the work visas. A lot of work visas can be renewed indefinitely. So for example, O1. O1 is the type of work visa that can be renewed indefinitely. There's no like a maximum stay like H1B 6 years, like L 5 or 7 years. There's no such max stay for O1, but still you have to apply for the extension like during your stay.
Sounds good. Let's move to question number two. I am currently under an F1 visa and I arrived at the US, just now, a couple months. And I wonder, Do I need to wait for 90 days to apply for an EB3 visa?
Oh, sorry, Ryan, I cannot see your screen.
Oh, I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. Is that what it is? Sorry, let me stop sharing and then resume. Everybody, let me know in the chat if you're able to see my screen. Um, Let me try that again.
Oh, sure. I can answer that second question. Oh, yeah, I can see the
Can you
question.
see it right now? Okay,
Yes.
sounds good. Let's resume.
Okay. So we should go back to what we just discussed during our presentation, right? There are two steps in the green card application, the filing of the petition and then the filing of the I-45. So I believe this person might be asking about the 90-day rule of some preconceived intent. However, in order to do the EB3, if you start the EB3, the first step is for the employer to go through the labor certification process. And in order to do the labor certification filing, the employer has to do the prevailing wage determination filing. So there are a lot of prerequisites going into the actual filing of the green card. And you have to go through the whole process first, like prerequisite process first before you can do the actual filing. So if we are talking about start the EB3 process, which means for the employer to start the prevailing wage determination filing, that is totally fine for the employer to start that process when you're here, like during the 90 days.
Absolutely. Let's move to question number three. Will my green card application be any way influenced by an RFE for my H1B?
Oh, get affected by an oh no, not at all. But I would say it really depends on what issue is raised in that H1B, right? So for example, if it's just like some of the things about like specialty occupation, that is fine. But if the RFE is about okay, USCIS notice you have some status maintenance issues, like the wage paid during the last H1B validity period did not meet the required wage level. That means you have a status maintenance issue, which would affect the green card as well.
Sounds good. All right. Another question about EB3. So this person wanted to know under EB3, can I change my employer and how to do that under what circumstances?
Well, my answer is you can always change employer in whenever you want to, in whatever stage. It's just like the impact on your green card is different. Okay, so let's say if the employer hasn't got the I-140 approved for you, and you leave the company, and then the employer doesn't want to continue the process for you anymore, and they either withdraw the I-140 before it's approved, or they just do not continue with the perm or the I-140, then you just need to start all over. You don't have a priority date secured for you. If you change employer after the I-140 is approved, then you have a priority date. So, but you still need another employer to restart the process so that you can use like recapture this priority date. But your priority date is secured. And then after the I-140, I mean, I-485 has been filed for 180 days, and then you change employer to a same or similar occupation, then you don't have to have the new employer like restart the perm process for you. So you can always change employer, in whenever you want to, in like at whatever phase of the green card. It's just like different timing would mean different impact on you, whether you can retain the priority date and whether you need a new employer to restart from the perm process.
Absolutely. And next question, I think it's kind of similar in a yes or no fashion. So can an employer sponsor an intern of a green card?
Sure, like the employer can sponsor anyone for a green card, even for someone who hasn't yet started working for the company, not to say an intern. However, if they sponsor an intern, the sponsored position in the green card process cannot be an internship position. That would have to be a permanent position. So even though the person's currently working as an intern, if the employer decide to sponsor the person, that would be a non-intern position, a permanent position.
Absolutely. And then next question, I think let's put it into a more general way. This person wanted to know if somebody's STEM OPT has expired. We don't know if the person has been out of status or no, but let's say the OPT has been expired, how to get back to legal status to work or to apply for a green card. I guess we need to know a little bit more about the personal situations right here. But out of the top of my head, one of the things that people do is that they would do an F1 reinstatement to reinstate their active F1 status. So, for example, if you apply to another school, you get back your status. Once it's approved, you can continue studying while applying for CPT. That in that way you can work. But Marta, do you have any other solutions for this kind of situations?
Right. First of all, don't let your STEM OPT expire without doing anything. It's if your plan is to continue studying at another program, you should start looking for that new program before the OPT expires, right? And it doesn't have to even go through the USCIS filing. That's usually done between schools, right? You have to go through the transfer process, and then you can start a program at another school. So yeah, but if your status has expired, be that STEM OPT or regular OPT or another status, usually that's very, very challenging to get you back into status without leaving the US, right? So usually that involves some sort of discretion from USCIS. As Ryan mentioned, filing F1 reinstatement, but that has to be like something to prove that your status expired due to something out of your control, right? It's not your fault, not just, oh, I forgot about my status expiration date, and now I'm asking for reinstatement. That doesn't work. It has to be something that you didn't get to control. Same thing for other status expiration. Like you usually have to show some extraordinary circumstance.
Yeah, and definitely we do want to know more about this person's situation. So, if you wanted to have more support when it comes to legal consultations, definitely send the QR code. We can connect you with the attorney so that you guys can have further discussion on that. Oh, I'm gonna move on question number 7. Is there a difference between the E1, E2, E3? I think this is the E category and then also the EB1, EB2, EB3. And then same questions for H1B, H1B1.
Mhm. Okay, so first of all, as we mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, whenever we see, those letters, we need to understand whether that is a work visa, like a non-immigrant visa that allows temporary stay, or is that a way to apply for the green card? So for all these like types listed here, that can be break into two groups. Okay, one is pass to the green card. That is EB1, EB2, EB3. Those are the ways like to apply for the green card. The other E1, E2, E3, H1B, H1B1, they are all temporary, like non-immigrant visa types. So that won't lead you to green card. It just give you temporary authorization status to stay within the US. So H1B, I'm sure everyone knows what H1B is. For H1B1, that's only limited to certain countries like Singaporean and Chile's, right? And for E1, E2, it's only limited to certain treaty countries, the countries that has treaty with the US. Unfortunately, for both mainland China and India, they don't have those kind of treaties with the US. For the E3, same, that's only limited to like Australians.
Hmm, good to know. And then next question, Q8 is somebody is an F1 student and the company doesn't sponsor, but there is gonna be another company which is under the same employer's name, opened, can the other company sponsor this employee, and then this employer also has this S corp? Is S corp have anything to do with green card sponsorships?
Yeah, S corps can definitely sponsor H1Bs as well, because after all, like whatever entity that has a federal employer identification number can sponsor. So that's the minimum requirement for a company to sponsor. Uh, from this question, it sounds like the current company doesn't sponsor because of some internal policy, right? Then the question is really about whether that other company owned by the boss, whether the boss is willing to sponsor you through that company. That's the first question we want to ask. And then we probably want to look at like, what does that company do? Like how many employees does that currently have? And what's your major? What kind of position it would be offered, would be able to offer you? So we would evaluate the case based on those other factors. But the first question is, does the boss want to sponsor you through that other company?
Right. I think if the answer is yes, if they are finding another way, I think once if the other company is qualified, I think it's absolutely they are able to sponsor the green card. Okay, let's move on. Can I be sponsored or get a green card on a commission only position?
No. For permanent positions, same as H1Bs, there's a base salary requirement. So in order to sponsor someone for either H1B or green card, the employer kind of promises to pay that person certain level of salary to sponsor. So that can be purely a commission-based position.
Absolutely. Let's move on. What are the options if your I-140 petition is approved, but priority date is not current?
That is all the other like non-immigrant visa types we discussed during our presentation. Like all these other work visas that are not subject to the annual quota, annual cap as H1B does, and also some of the students continue studying in the US while like maybe they finish the last program. So you would need to look into these other non-immigrant visa types to look for the right type that maybe suits your personal situation the best.
Absolutely. For those of you who come in halfway of today's sessions, don't worry. We will edit today's sessions and we will post on YouTube and share it to you through email. Okay, let's move on. Could you please go through a bit about perm processing for EB green card timeline in particular?
Yeah, the timeline for the perm right now is pretty tough. It is taking quite a while. It's a pretty lengthy process. So there is this so-called like the prevailing wage determination as a prerequisite for filing the perm. So that alone would take about 6 months. Uh, and then you have to go through the mandatory, like the recruitment steps, right? Let's just give that like maybe 2 months. And then there's the quiet period for 1 month. So if everything goes like super smoothly, you still need like about 9 months from the date like the employer agrees to start the process until we can file the perm. And then the perm adjudication currently takes a little over a year. So altogether, from the beginning until the perm certification, like the perm approval, I would say it's somewhere between 18 to 24 months.
Okay, good to know. Let's move on. Another question about perm. I think we kind of addressed this, do we? Priority date can be perm petition date. Is that correct?
Yeah, the perm, like the labor certification filing date.
Okay. So how do I know if I'm qualified for EB2 self-petition?
Well, the EB2 self-petition would be the national interest waiver. It is kind of really hard to tell because it doesn't have very specific criteria like listed out as the EB ones do or the O ones do. But basically, we need to show like you need to show your proposed endeavor would bring national importance. So that would be a case by case evaluation. Usually, that's most common among some of the students who have, let's say, publications, like they have published papers, or maybe they have some patents. So that is very common for these students to get the national interest waiver. Or maybe there are some other, like say in other fields, like they have their own company. They may be like the co-owner in a startup, and then that startup is doing great things. Maybe we would also be able to do national interest waiver for those. Or there might be some art students, some artists, they have done exhibitions, they have certain reports like media coverage about what the artistic work they have done. That's also possible if they can show the enrichment of the cultural and artistic field in the US.
Next question. I don't think I quite understand this questions, but let's put it in that way because the question says what type of visa is that one where the employer requests the green card? Let's put it that way. When or under what stage is the employer going to, apply for the green card? Or under what stage is the employer officially started to applying for the green card?
I suspect maybe this question is asking like which types of like the maybe the immigration petitions are employer sponsored, like require the employer sponsorship. If
Mhm.
that's the question, then EB1B for outstanding researcher requires sponsorship from the employer. EB1C, the multi national transferee require employer sponsorship. The perm-based EB2 and the EB3 require employer sponsorship as well.
Sounds good. Let's move on. Next one, I am Indian, visa status on H1B. Can my elder brother file petition for me? And what will be the waiting time for it?
Okay, I assume the elder brother is a US citizen because only US citizens can file a petition for the siblings. You cannot file for siblings as a green card holder. So I assume that's a US citizen sibling filing. However, that is the longest wait, unfortunately, among all the categories. So currently, if we look at the visa bulletin, even for data filing, okay, data filing, family-based, Indian-born, F4. Okay, so U.S. citizen filing for siblings, that is under F4. The cutoff date, like the priority date shown in the current like October visa bulletin is June the 15th, 2006.
Wow.
So like that is almost like an 18 years wait. So if you are currently in H1B status, the maximum stay for H1B is 6 years. And I-130 cannot help you to extend your H1B beyond the 6 year. You have to have an I-140. Okay. So you probably still need to look into some sort of employment-based petition to extend the H1B time.
All right, let's move on. If you have a technology company, can that company apply for your green card? Let's say this question, I'm not sure if you are a owner of that company or are you just speaking general sense, is tech companies gonna apply for a green card? But let's say you are the owner of the company.
Yeah, I think maybe the question is asking what if that's the owner of a tech company. So
Mm,
if you're the owner of a tech company, it will be very challenging for you to do the perm-based EB2 or EB3. Um, but if you're the owner of the tech company and your company is doing very well, for example, it has released some great products, it has received fundings from some, institutional investors, then maybe you can look into the national interest waiver.
absolutely. Okay, let's move on. I am opening an LLC company in the US, and we have operations in Peru already. Is there a way I can use the L1 visa to sponsor myself here in the US?
I would say maybe. First, it depends on how well, like what's the operation in Peru is like how many employees you have at that company. But another very important question is when did you work at that company in Peru? Like for how long? Because in order to qualify for the L1 visa, you have to be working full time for at least a year within the 3 years preceding the filing of the current L petition. Okay, so have you worked at that company since like 2021, right? Yeah, 2021. And you have to be physically outside the US in order to count toward that 1 year time.
And that 1 year, is that consecutive 12 month, or can that be break down into like two different period?
Yeah, that has to be continuous.
Hmm.
But you can still have like brief trips to the US, but it has to be continuous employment.
Sounds good. Thank you for your answer. Let's move on. Can I drop my day one CPT program if I got selected in the H1B? I'm currently in process of EB3.
Well, whatever you do, you need to make sure you are a bona fide student. All right. So if you today you have a legit reason to quit school, that's okay. But if like, if like the pattern doesn't look good on you, okay, it may raise questions down the road, like, whether you were a bona fide student when you decided to enroll in that program. Nobody's going to go after you right now, but at the stage, let's say I went I-45, like the last phase of the green card. You might be called for like an interview. That's a possibility. And you might be questioned for anything in your status history. And you need to provide, some justification for all the decisions you have made.
For sure. Let's move on to the next one. How does day one CPT work if there is a 1 year? I believe this person wanted to say the 1 year CPT minimum requirements. I think this is a great question.
Right. So, first of all, for a lot of the graduate programs, the 1 year can be waived if we show this is like an integral part of the curriculum, right? And also, it doesn't have to be 1 year at that particular school. It can be the 1 year from the transfer out school as well. So I'm sure, when you decide like the programs to work with, you can definitely have a more in-depth like discussion with the school officer, or like have a consultant like Ryan to consult depending on your own situation.
Yeah, definitely. We would like to look into the student's particular situation, but just to put it that way, even though, some institutions would require or usually require a 1 year requirement on US full-time study experience before you apply for that CPT, for graduate program exclusively actually is the university's cause to design the program whether or not they require that 1 year study. So, for example, the university could still set up a program and then make executive experience mandatory, meaning that while you are studying your courses, participating into training and internships, it's integral to your education. You have to perform some kind of training or work in order to get your degree. So in that case, that actually can exclude you from that 1 year CPT requirement. I don't know if I make that clear, but if you have further questions, you can feel free to scan the QR code in our screens, and our consultants will give you more in-depth explanation on that. Let's move on. I think we still have one last minute, so let's do one more question before I let you go. And what is the EB1A and EB3 eligibility criteria? I think we kind of mentioned that in the presentation, but just to reiterate that, to focus on the highlight just a little bit.
Sure, I will try to do this quick because I can probably do a whole session for each one of them. EB1A is for those who can show their extraordinary ability in the field. If you go to the USCIS website, there are 10 criteria listed. So in order to qualify for the EB1A, we have to first meet 3 out of the 10 criteria. And the second, we need to show to USCIS that overall, with the totality of the evidence, this person is a very like small percentage of people who are at the very top of their field. So we're showing this person is doing great in the field, like with extraordinary ability. And for EB3, that is employer sponsored, like green card pass, like petition. So in EB3 or the EB2, like perm based, they share a lot of similarity in the requirement. Basically, the employer, in order to sponsor this foreign worker for the green card, have to show that there's no minimally qualified US worker for this position. That's what they need to prove. Currently, they need to prove that through a labor market test. That is the perm process. They have to go through all these advertising to show, like, after putting out all those ads, there's no minimally qualified US workers, so they can continue sponsoring that foreign worker for the green card.
Sounds great. I think we are wrapping up for today's session. I want to first thank everybody for attending today's session. We have lots of great questions, even though we haven't answered everyone for you, but don't worry. We love to do this kind of webinars every week. So definitely check out our future webinars and we will definitely be glad to invite Marta back with us once again so you can, show us more insights with what the immigration policies and then it looks like for our students. And then I want to thank Marta for giving us the thoughtful presentation and also answering as much questions in a wonderful way as you can. And then I want to wish everybody have a great night and hopefully I see everybody very soon.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. I'll see everybody soon.